Hey, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the new features that come with the new update for Arborea. This new update comes with asset swapping, per instance scaling, the ability to update Arborea within Blender, and then manual scattering, which is the main part of this update, which will allow you to actually just paint your assets onto your surfaces, move them around individually, scale them, tilt them, and just have complete control over your scatter systems. And in this video, I'm just going to go through these updates and just give you an overview of how they work, what they are, and just how to find them. So let's get started. And I'm going to start with the in Blender add-on updating. So in the new update, you're going to see this icon up here, and this is where you can actually update the add-on directly within the end panel. So if there is a new update, this is going to most likely be red, just indicating that there's a new update available. And if you go in here right now, it's just going to most likely show you have the latest version just because you just installed the new version. If you want to check again, so if I announce that there's a new update, but it's not showing in here, just click the check again. It's going to refresh and most likely update with the new available update. It's going to show the current version, the new available version, and then all of the info of what's included in that new version, as well as an install button. You can click the install button and it's just going to automatically delete the old version, reinstall the new version, and give you a pop-up saying close and reopen Blender to finish the update, just so it refreshes everything and gives you a clean, full new install. And also there's this reinstall button as well. So if you do have the current version, but you need to reinstall it for some reason, you can just do that here. All right, the next feature is asset swapping. So let me go into here. Let's just bring in, I don't know, this black willow or something. So say I'm working and I have a tree or an asset or something like that positioned in a certain way that I like. So something like this. And say I like the asset being there, but I don't actually like this specific one anymore. You can actually just go to a different asset. So first select your asset and then go into the asset browser. There's this new dropdown called the import menu. And as you can see, we have swap inside of here. So we can actually swap this asset while keeping the same exact transform. So you can see the rotation, scale, position, none of that changed. So yeah, this just makes swapping assets quick and easy. And this is available in the windowed browser and the pop-up browser, same exact place. And you can swap this with any asset as well. So you can see right here, you can even swap it with the smaller plants, grasses, bigger assets, and it just keeps the exact same transforms. So yeah, that just saves you the effort of having to delete the asset, re-import a new one, move it over to the place, copy those transforms. It just does that automatically for you. Okay, and the next feature is the per instance scaling. So this one's a good one as well. So let me create a scatter system real fast. I'll set this as an emitter. Let's also make this textured so we can see the textures. I'll scale this up a little bit, apply rotation and scale, and let's create a scatter system with some trees. So I'll do some Douglas firs. We'll create a scatter system with this. And let's lower the density to 0.05 or something. There we go. Let's bring in some smaller assets as well. So these black spruces are quite a bit smaller than these Douglas firs. So this will be a good example right here. I'll do add to active system. So it adds these black spruces to this Douglas fir system. And now let's go over to the instances tab. And then down here, you're going to see use per instance scaling. So I'm just going to enable this and you're going to see we have this new section here with global scale and XYZ scale. So I'm just going to move this slider and you're going to see only this specific spruce is scaling and no other asset. Same with Douglas fir 2. If I do that, only Douglas fir 2 is scaling. So this gives you a lot of control over the exact scale of individual assets. So if you have a scatter system with a bunch of different asset types and they're all a wide variety of scales and you want them to be kind of normalized, you can go in and normalize your system that way. To make this quicker as well, you can turn on sync variation scales. So there's usually multiple variations inside of Arborea for each asset type. So as you can see, there's 4 black spruces in this one and 4 Douglas firs. Sync variation scale is actually just going to scale each asset type together. So I can choose any of these Douglas firs, change the scale, and all of Douglas firs are going to scale together. So this just makes it faster. So you can just go in, scale only the specific asset types together and not have to do them one by one if you don't want to. And then of course you have the XYZ scale as well, which will allow you to, control just the specific axis scales, which generally I don't use as much, but sometimes that comes in handy if you want to make something slightly taller or something like that. But yeah, that is the per instance scaling. If you don't want that anymore, you can just toggle that off and it will reset back to default. So yeah, pretty easy to use and it comes in handy a lot for procedural systems. All right, the next feature I want to talk about is manual scattering, which is a really powerful update for scattering. It gives you control over every aspect of your like positioning, scaling, rotation of each individual asset in your scatter system. And there's multiple ways we can access this as well. I'll start with the first way, which is just creating a manual scatter system directly. In the new update, there's this dropdown right here in your asset browser, which by default is procedural. You can swap this to manual. This is also in the pop-up as well, as you can see. Procedural, manual, that's right there. And then also in here as well, you can find that drop down in the scatter import settings. Okay, let's start with some ferns. So I'm gonna do scatter asset, and it's gonna automatically create a manual scatter system, which the layout's gonna be a little bit different than what you're used to. There's gonna be all these sculpt brushes, and then also this red sculpting brush as well in sculpt mode. For the most part, the UI is pretty similar. There's some features missing in manual mode versus procedural, just because certain things don't work with manual mode like they do in procedural. But yeah, you can access all of these features still while in manual mode too. And then above this, there's this new brush settings section, which you can see it shows the settings depending on what brush you're in, just for quick access. So let's start with our brushes. So there's two distribution brushes. So there's density and then there's add. And I'm gonna start with density. This is pretty much like a spray brush. So if I just point and click around, you can actually just spray assets around on your emitter. There's two different controls for how you distribute your assets. There's distance minimum, which I know a lot of you guys have used very similar controls, which is just the minimum distance between each hair particle. So this allows you to kind of like evenly space your assets apart from each other. And then count max is kind of like the density. So basically per spray, it will have a maximum count of whatever you choose here. So if I want to do like 500 or something, or maybe like 230, it's going to be much more dense. If I do 1, now it's going to be kind of like 1 here and there, and it's just going to be a lot more subtle. Okay, let me show you how the distance minimum works. I'll do like 2 or something like that, maybe a count max of 25. And now you can see the spacing is a little bit more even. There's a minimum distance of 2 units apart from each hair. If I want to do something like maybe 5, and now I'll go back over this as well, it'll actually update that to be a minimum of 5 units apart. So this is really good for just like evenly spacing assets. If you have trees or something too, so like you're doing a forest or something, this is really helpful for not having too many like overlapping trees. If it's like a tree or something, I'd probably try something like 15, 25, depending on how big the trees are. But yeah, this is super helpful for that. If you're doing grass or something, this is pretty good for kind of like a lower value. So let me actually swap this to grass real fast. I'll do short grass. I'm gonna swap so we stay in the same system. Let's do something like 0.25 or something like that. Maybe 50 on the count max. And now you can see we can still get a really dense value, but they're evenly spaced between 0.25. If I do 0.5, it'll evenly space them at that density too. But if you set this to 0, it's gonna be kind of like just random distribution. There can be overlap. So you can see right here, if I keep adding, it's just gonna be super, super dense versus 0.5, where no matter what, it's going to always stay that specific density at max. So yeah, mess with those two sliders. After using it for a little bit, you'll kind of find your preferences for different asset types, like what you like to use for grasses or smaller assets, what you like to use for bigger assets. Those values kind of change just based on the size of the asset and what they are, but it's pretty easy to use and super nice to work with. And let's move on to the add brush. So this works much differently than this brush here. So let me actually erase this real fast. So there's the delete brush, which is basically an eraser. So as you can see right here, I can actually just erase what I put just by dragging around and clicking those away. Okay, let's also swap our system to something bigger like a fern. Oh yeah, how about these right here? I'll do swap system, so we're still in the same exact system. And this is kind of like a point and click brush. So if I just point and click, we can actually just distribute our assets one by one this way. So if you just want to like hand place assets around, you can do this. Another cool thing with this brush is you don't actually have to just point and click one specific asset at a time. You can actually make clusters. So if I want to do like 16 assets at a time, you can point and click random clusters of 16, or you can do random clusters of like 3. Oops. So this gives you a lot of control over many ways to distribute your assets. This is also really good for trees. So generally, if I'm like scattering trees in manual mode, this is the way I'll do it. I do usually a count of 1. Let's swap this to, how about the black spruces. So I'll swap this system. Let's go into scale. I'm just going to scale these down. So as you can see, the procedural controls still work with the manual scattering too. So you can actually mix those together. But yeah, in here, I can actually just point and click assets around. And this is super helpful because generally forests can get very, very dense. And this allows you to just kind of like hand place them around really quickly and not have to scatter just like hundreds or thousands more trees than you actually need. You can just get them specifically where you need. And of course, you can still cluster those trees too. So yeah, lots of control over what you need there. All right, so let's talk about some of the other controls now. So we can go to the slide brush, which allows you to move your assets around. So basically, I can grab these and drag the assets into different places. So you can, point and click them into a specific area and then fine tune the placement from there. So if you place it in a certain place, but you want it slightly over here, you can do that. Or if you decide you want to just kind of group these together, you can do so. If you make a bigger brush, it's kind of like soft selection. So you can see they all kind of like warp together. Or you can use a smaller brush and then just grab a specific asset this way. Okay, let's move over to comb right here. So comb is kind of like the tilt brush. It allows you to actually kind of tilt these. So I think default is a value of 1, which can be strong in some cases. As you can see right here, it's a little bit strong in this case. 0.35 is generally what I use in most cases, I would say. It just kind of depends on what you're comfortable with. But yeah, this just allows you to control the exact kind of tilt and rotation of your assets individually this way. Another cool thing with this too is, let's go back to grass. How about that? And I'm just going to swap this with some grass real fast. So swap system. Let's make these a little bit bigger just so I don't have to make it as dense. There we go. Okay, so I have grass right here, and you don't actually just have to do, individual assets like that. You can actually like comb them all together, as you can see right here. So say you have somebody like walking through grass or something in a still render, you can kind of push these down like that, and you can see we're able to actually comb the direction, just like it's hair essentially, because we're using hair systems for this manual scattering. So it works the exact same. And if I want to bring these back up, I can kind of roughen that up a little bit. Yeah, so comb is super powerful. There's many different ways we can use this. If you kind of want to reset this too, so you can see these are all kind of pushed down and you don't want to have to like try to kind of push these back up with the comb brush, which works. It's just a little bit messy. Let me just flatten this out real fast so I can show you. We can go over here to puff. So puff is going to kind of reset and puff them up. Generally, a strength of 1 is a little bit slow. I'll generally just do like a strength of 10. The slider won't go higher than 1 by default, but you can just actually type in 10 and it'll actually accept that as a value. And now you can see it works much more quickly. So yeah, this is kind of like the reset brush. So it just kind of resets the rotation and puffs them up a little bit. Okay, pinch. Let me erase this real fast and let's just swap back to like a flower system or something. Let's try these right here. So I'll swap with the asters. Let's just place some asters down. Let's do something like this. There we go. Okay, so I have this cluster of asters right here. If I go to pinch, I'll show you how this works now. So by default, pinch pinches these in, but if you hold control, you can actually kind of push them out away from each other too, which I generally find good for flowers like this. This is why I am demonstrating with a flower cluster, because right now they're all standing up, straight. And there's a lot of times where flowers will kind of like rotate and like droop apart from each other along the edges. And if you hold control and click, you can kind of do that here. And this is super helpful for just kind of quickly kind of pushing the rotation away from each other this way. And then of course, if you want to kind of push this back in, you can just kind of click it through. There we go. And then of course you can go back to comb if you want to kind of like adjust anything directly this way, like that. Yeah, so that's super helpful. I use that a lot for flowers and like kind of like shrub clusters and just things that are in clusters essentially. That's what I use it for, but you can use it in many different scenarios as well. But yeah, pull tips. This is kind of like a grow and shrink mixed with comb. It used to be called snake hook, but let's actually just bring in an asset like that and then go back to the pull tips. So you can see if I pull it up and down, it scales it, but also it kind of keeps the rotation too. So it's like the comb brush and the scale brush in one. So this can be a little bit finicky if you have like a very high strength, but it's super powerful for just quickly kind of getting the scale and rotation of what you need. And you can do this with multiple assets at the same time as well. I would usually recommend something a little bit smaller, maybe 0.25, something like that. So you can kind of just like kind of sculpt it. All right, and the last brush I want to talk about is the select brush. So let me actually create a bigger kind of distribution. There we go. Okay, so the select brush. Earlier I had the overlay turned off, but by default you'll see these hair particles, and that's just because we're using a hair system to distribute the assets. And by default, everything is selected. So whenever you have the hairs selected, they're white. But if I use this brush, you're going to see all of those hairs disappear except for where I'm selecting. So this is just me creating a new selection. And if you want to select everything, just click A and that'll select all hairs. Or you can just, point and click and drag a new selection. And at the moment, this works kind of like masking. So you can only edit selected hairs. So let's do this right now. And let's go to move. So if I go over here, I can't move any of these assets anymore, but I can move the selected ones. So this can be helpful if you want to kind of mask out a certain section. If you're trying to specifically edit a certain section of your system and you kind of perfected the other part, you can just go to your selection brush and say, I want to avoid this middle area. I can just go over here, select around it. If you hold shift, you can continue the selection. There we go. If you hold control, you can deselect. And if you do control I, that can invert as well. So control I to invert the selection too. So we have this selection. If I want to go over to move, you can move everything except for that middle section. And you can just tug things in crazy ways too. Obviously that's way too much, but you get the point. And also A to reselect everything, and then you can switch back to your other brushes and then edit the rest of the system from there. So I plan on adding some more features to the selection brush. I'm working on a freeze brush, which would allow you to basically have it ignore the procedural settings. So you can swap back and forth between manual and procedural mode, and those frozen assets are going to stay in place and not be affected by the seed or density controls if you switch back to procedural. But I'm still working on that. It's working at the moment, but it's a little bit buggy. That'll be a feature update. So I'll let you guys know when that's actually implemented. And this is about it for the manual scattering, but I do want to show you some other ways you can use this. So let's go back to procedural, and how about this? We'll create a Liberta scatter system. Okay, so I have my Liberta system like this. Can up the density, maybe make a noise pattern like this. There we go. Change the seed. How about make it a little bit smaller like that? Perfect. So we have our procedural system like this. I can go to rotation 2 maybe. So now what we can do is we can actually swap from the procedural to manual mode and then basically adjust our procedural system. As you can see, everything's the same. I can go into manual mode and start moving things around. So I use this a lot because in a lot of my projects, I can just kind of quickly create a rough procedural system, not really worry about the seeds too much, just kind of get the density, the scaling, the random rotation, all of that situated, and then move into manual mode and then fine tune from there. So that just kind of saves me from having to flip through seeds for hours and just try to figure out the kind of random distribution. And I can just kind of directly swap into manual mode and refine from there. You can also create manual scatter systems from selected objects in the viewport. So if I select this right here, you can either go Alt-Q, add manual, or add procedural. Or if you have procedural or manual set here, so if I do manual, and then just select this asset in the viewport, click this, it's going to do the same exact thing. And you can scatter people. And of course, if I have manual set here, and then I do Alt-Q, add procedural, it's still going to create a procedural system as well. So yeah, that is manual scattering, and I'm super excited about this update. There's a lot you can do with this, and I also plan on adding a lot more features to this. So especially since we now have the in add-on updating, I'm probably going to be updating a lot more frequently just because it's a lot easier to upload updates and also for you guys to download and install new updates. So yeah, there's lots more coming. And if you have any questions or anything that I kind of skipped over, let me know. You can just send me a Discord message or an email and I'll get back to you with any info you need. And of course, also, if you run into any bugs or issues with the new update, you can go down here to feedback, bug report, and that will just link you to my website where you can email me. You can, of course, go to Discord, report bugs there in my DMs or my server too. And I'll get back to you with any solution I can as quickly as possible. So yeah, hopefully that helps. And if you have any questions, again, let me know. And I'll talk to you guys on the next video.